what is quorum? So quorum is basically, when a cluster is in quorum, that means the majority of the nodes are healthy and it can communicate with each other. So quorum is basically a precondition that is required for a cluster to be in functioning mode. Okay. So suppose when a quorum is lost, the cluster will not have the functionality or the ability to accomplish the normal operations like sending the cluster communication data from one node to another node. Okay. So to understand this in a better way, suppose let's take an example of 6 node cluster. Okay, 6 node cluster. Okay, so suppose uh, you know only one collection of the nodes, it can have a quorum. Okay, to keep the data integrity in the cluster. So suppose in the 6 node cluster, one of the HAPI like 2 nodes has lost the connection with the other 4 nodes. Okay, so two nodes two nodes of a HA pair lost the connection with other 4 nodes. Okay, so what will happen? So as it has lost the connection, but the set of the nodes are online. Okay, so what happened is that the other pair, right? So uh, means what I mean to say is, so when as I said that 4 node cluster, right, 2 nodes like 6 node cluster, 2 nodes have lost the connection with the other 4 nodes. So what will happen is that, so both the nodes are online, but for the time being, only the collection of the nodes that has the quorum, it can operate as a cluster. Okay, so in this way what will happen is that once the connectivity is restored, so the remaining nodes which are not having the quorum, right, it will reconcile with the other nodes to have the data in a single data view. Okay, in the cluster there is always a master node which is called as a RDB master. Okay, master node, which is basically RDB master. Okay, this node is responsible to synchronize the information between all the nodes in the cluster. Master node, it will be chosen by a voting protocol. Each node in the cluster, they will take part of the election of the master node. In case of unlikely failure of the master node, a new master will be elected by the remaining nodes. Okay, so cluster basically is in a quorum when majority of the nodes are operational. The situation becomes more complicated when during the connectivity issues, even number of nodes are split. For example, 4 node cluster, 2 HAPS are split evenly. Okay, so in that case we have the concept of epsilon. Okay, even number of nodes, like suppose in 4 nodes. Okay, so 2 nodes are having like 2 HAPS, it is part of like 2 HAPS, right? 2 HAPS. Okay, so what happened? So there is some connectivity issues. So in that case we have to understand the concept of epsilon. Okay, so what is epsilon? So epsilon is basically assigned to a single node in the cluster. So it will give an extra voting right, extra voting weight, which is basically the deciding factor when there is some connectivity with the equal portion of the larger cluster. Like it's a 4 node cluster, like 4 node cluster 2 HAPI, and equal portions fails, means 2 node fails. So in that case we have to take care of we have to the cluster will decide which will have the quorum depending on the epsilon. So the group of the nodes that contains the epsilon will have the quorum. So this epsilon is required to avoid split brain situation, like when both the halves of the cluster could end up having the two different like read-write copies of replicated database. Okay, so epsilon is automatically basically assigned to the first node when the cluster is created. In case of a node failure, the epsilon automatically reassigned to healthy node. Okay, and it will have, so that it will decide, okay, the data does not get corrupted. So epsilon is the one deciding factor. It will have the extra voting rights. Okay, so let me show you this in the lab. 1 second. So first you have to go to the diagnostic mode or advanced mode. Then this is the command to run cluster show -epsilon start. Okay, then what we need to do is suppose you want to assign the epsilon to another node in the cluster, right? So you can do that by using the cluster modify command. So you have to do using the cluster modify command. So let me do that. Cluster modify hyphen node. Okay. So first one, I'll give it false, not a problem. It is already false. The second one, I'll give it as true. Okay. Wait. Yeah, here. The problem here is this is a lab, okay? And the version that I'm using is it's a really a blue paddle version. This is basically simulator. Okay, so problem is here this is not allowed. This HA configuration is not allowed, but this is how you do it. Okay, you can have the epsilon modified here. This is how you do it, and then you can do the cluster show command epsilon, so it will show that which is having that epsilon. Okay, so in a two node cluster, uh, neither of the nodes will have the epsilon. Both the nodes are equally important. If one node goes down, the other node will become the master, RDB master. Okay, so in such configurations, like in such small configuration like two node cluster, right, instead of holding epsilon, both the nodes are continuously polled to ensure that both the nodes are operational. So both the nodes will be sending the synchronous data. I know it will be like it will try to continuously ensure that both are operational. In other words, so each node will monitor the other node using the disconnectivity status. Okay, because in two node cluster in one HA pair, both the cluster nodes have connected to same disk because we have crisscross connections in data. So in case of failure, the remaining node will take over all the operations. Means it will have the suppose one disk shelf is directly connected to node one, like here cluster 101. So the other disk shelf, when this is down, the this node will have the connectivity to this to the disk shelves of this one. Okay, or the own disk which is owned by the node one. Okay, so when failure happens, what will happen is the remaining the remaining node which is online, it will take over all the operations, everything will migrate there, and it will become the RDB master node. Okay, so this is how it happens. Okay, so thank you so much for watching this video. It is a short video just to explain the epsilon. Okay, okay, thank you. And one more thing is there, in case of metro cluster, mm, in case of, one second, control here. In case of metro cluster, we have the concept of quorum. Okay, so quorum is something which will install in a like third site, in a Linux server something, and quorum is the one which will decide where the connection should be, like which one should be online in case of metro cluster. Like suppose one is production, one is DR, so production is operating the quorum, or production is down, so it will switch over to the DR, so DR will have the quorum. Okay, so that's how it is. Okay, so this is what we do here. So these are the main questions that it may come in some of the interviews, quorum, epsilon, all these things. So this is one. Okay, okay, let me just stop this here.